Hello everyone. In this video, we will be covering the next phase in our hybrid project management model, planning. Along with the planning phase, we will be discussing the main artifacts for planning, the Gantt chart, and the list of user stories. Let's jump into it. We will start off by discussing what the planning phase entails. Next, we will discuss what a Gantt chart is and how it is created in the planning phase. We will be moving away from waterfall project management and into Agile with Scrum user stories. Lastly, we will combine waterfall and Agile in our discussion of user stories in a Gantt chart. Speaking of hybrid project management, let's review where we are at in our model. We're in the second phase of our model, and we're starting to include a little bit more of Agile project management methods with the inclusion of user stories. We flow into this phase from the initiating phase and transition into the executing phase after we are completed, where our Agile methods ramp up in their use. So what exactly is involved in the planning phase? This is arguably the most important phase in our project. The adage, measure twice, cut once, rings true when it comes to IT project management. While we treat the 5 phases of project management as discrete entities, in practice, there's a bit of overlap. Often, as you are starting the planning phase, you will still be refining the initiating phase items. You may be also in the project of working through the project schedule and realize that you need to adjust some of the items, like project definition, scope, or team members. The project schedule is often compiled into a Gantt chart, or a tiered list of phases and tasks along a timeline. Here's an example of a Gantt chart from the Project Management Institute. We can see it's a high-level set of sections or phases across a 16-week period. This plan is a very typical example of a project in IT project management. It starts with gathering requirements of what is needed to be completed. The product is then designed and developed. Testing of the project ensures that it is successful in accomplishing its function, and then the product is implemented. Now, obviously, there are a number of tasks that fall under each of these categories, but this is a nice high-level representation of what a typical Gantt chart looks like. Starting from requirements gathering, how do we ensure that design sets up development properly? How do we make sure that testing actually validates that the development accomplishes what the design specified based on the requirements gathered? Waterfall project management breaks down the phases into discrete tasks using a work breakdown structure. And what is a work breakdown structure? Well, the PMI defines this as a deliverable-oriented hierarchical decomposition of work. Or, to simplify, a list of what needs to be done, broken down into sections, subsections, and tasks. While that level of detail can be beneficial for some projects, a more modern approach to defining the work that needs to be done focuses on the end result instead of the task itself. This approach is referred to as user stories. And this approach comes from Agile project management and is incorporated into most hybrid project management models. A user story is comprised of 3 basic elements that tell a story. This flow is as follows. As a user, I want to complete an action in order to achieve a result. We are referring to the first section as the audience. Who is the target group of people we are trying to design and develop for in this scenario? The second piece we are referring to as the action. What are they trying to accomplish? Lastly, we are titling the third part as the business case. Why do they want to accomplish this? An example of this might be, as an administrator of this software, I want to be able to query the list of licensed users so that I can audit the number of people who can access the system I manage. This laser-focused approach helps prevent the project from getting distracted by erroneous tasks and other non-beneficial items. Now that we've discussed using Gantt charts to create a schedule of work and reviewed the format and purpose of a user story, how do we combine those two together? User stories are most often used by development teams to provide a baseline requirement. Given that this falls in the executing phase of our hybrid project management model, user stories and agile practices in general are blended into waterfall project management across the planning phase, peaking in the executing phase, and fading a little bit in the controlling phase. The user stories, therefore, are completed in the design portion, actually worked on in the development section, and used to validate against in the testing segment. Reviewing our example Gantt chart, our user stories would fall into 3 categories highlighted: design, development, and test. The title of each story is usually sufficient detail for the line item under each section in the Gantt chart. In other words, the entire story does not need to be listed out. We've just covered waterfall project management in the form of Gantt charts, agile project management in the form of user stories, and how to combine the two by weaving user stories in the planning phase, culminating in the validation occurring in the controlling phase. Now we need to dive a bit further into how these user stories are managed within the executing phase. In our next video, we will look at some of the standard Scrum events that occur in a cyclical nature during our development inside the executing phase. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.